Any member state can speak any language it wishes to speak, provided they bring their own interpreter who will interpret that statement into one of the official languages of the United Nations.
That is head of the United Nations Interpretation Services, Hossam Fahar, speaking about the importance of having interpreters at the international body's General Assembly. It doesn't come as a surprise that the United Nations encourages member states to bring their own interpreters, rather than providing some central interpretation services. Now, why does the United Nations do that? My name is Iris Xu. You're listening to The Divide. And today we're speaking with someone who knows the answer to that.
My name is Beatrice Gallelli, and I'm currently an assistant professor at Ca Foscari University in Venice, and I'm also a researcher at the think tank based in Rome, Istituto Affari Internazionali, IAI.
And Beatrice's research revolves around the role of translation in reframing China's official narratives.
Basically, my research focuses on the role of translation in recrafting the narrative for an international audience. I'm doing here for this project, for the one which was funded by the Taiwan Fellowship, is basically trying to analyze the translation strategies adopted to translate key political documents, and I'm specifically focusing now on Xi Jinping's speeches about cross-strait relations. So what I want to do, and I'm also collaborating with a couple of colleagues to analyze how the official narrative that Beijing proposes and support about the cross-strait relations actually is adjusted or remolded for the international audience. Because translation, and we start from these theoretical premises, the translation is never innocent. So there is always a choice behind the translation, always a choice, so what to maintain, what to transform in the process of translation. And we want to analyze what are the strategies that official institutions adopt when it comes to the translation of speeches dealing with cross-strait relations.
I see. And what are the strategies?
It depends on the language, because as I said, I'm collaborating with a couple of colleagues. We wrote a paper doing a comparison between three different translations into three different languages: English, Italian, and Arabic. And we found out that the translation strategies adopted for each language is different. Generally speaking, we found out that for the English language, they adopt a more communicative approach, in a sense that it means that basically in some parts, they also soften the language. Use a softer language to convey the message, while in the Italian and the Arabic one, they tend to be more ideologically close to the Chinese version of the text. For the analysis, we always started from the Chinese. So basically, what we did and what we will continue to do is to first analyzing the discursive and rhetorical devices employed in the Chinese, and then see how they are transformed or whether they are also maintained in the translation in English, Italian, and Arabic. To give you an example, when it comes to for instance, a key rhetorical device is the use of a family metaphor to convey the idea that Taiwan is part of the Chinese nation. The Chinese nation is one big family. And so there are blood relations between the two. And when it comes to the translation, the English version maintains the metaphor when it is at the center of the rhetorical strategy of a specific passage. But it does so in a less emphatic way, compared to the Italian and the Arabic, where the family metaphor is not only maintained, but is often strengthened, especially in the Arabic one. And this is interesting because we see that we kind of trying to understand why there are these differences in the translation strategies. And one possible answer to this question is that while the English version addresses a very broad audience, so because it's English is a language of globalization, basically. So it addresses not a specific cultural or linguistic community, but a very broad audience, the world, the entire world, we can say. Instead, the Italian and Arabic are smaller communities, and they use these strategies to resonate with the culture of the addressed community. Where like in both in the Italian culture and in the Arabic world culture, family is a very important within the society. So they try to maintain this aspect to persuade the audience about the legitimate claim over Taiwan.
And do you think this strategy is working?
With the Taiwanese, you mean? I don't really think it is working. And this is my first time in Taiwan, in Taipei, and I learned a lot during my staying here. Something that I find out is that while Chinese soft power, so if you want to use this concept, like which is widely used in the field of international relations, I don't see that it's really working here. Compare especially to the Japanese soft power. Walking in the street, you can realize that Japanese soft power is much stronger here. I mean, I found so many shops selling specifically Japanese products, and I also know there is quite a hot debate about the words that in school, but also in generally people should use to describe the period of Japanese colonization, whether this word colonization should be used to describe that period or not, or Japanese rule. So was fascinating by the fact that also in Taiwan, in the political discourse and the public discourse, I mean, the words that people should use to describe history is very important. And this is one aspect also, of course, from Beijing point of view, is very important.
When it comes to Italian and Arabic, do you see those strategies affecting, say, Italy or Arabic countries' perception of China?
Well, this is a very good question. I must say that I'm not a specialist in China-Arabic relations. The analysis on the Arabic version was conducted by a colleague of mine who is a PhD student at Ca Foscari University at the moment, and he's fluent in both Chinese and Arabic. So he covered mostly that section of the analysis. When it comes to Italy, it depends, because there are a few obstacles to China's soft power in a sense. One is that, of course, the international debate around China nowadays is very polarized. And especially after COVID-19, and even more so after Russian aggression to Ukraine. I don't see that the image of China has positively developed recently, especially, as I said, after COVID and after Russian aggression in Ukraine, China's backing of Russian narrative, and so on. So I don't see that it's really working in Italy. And also this, in the case of the governance of China, in the translation of the governance of China, when it comes to the entire translation strategies, there are a few passages that sound kind of weird to Italian speakers. I don't remember specifically, but there was a passage dealing with an expression which was in Chinese, dealing with the New Year, something very culturally based, and the translation is very awkward. It sounds very awkward. This is linked to the political process behind the translation, because when compared to the English and the Arabic version, the Italian one was commissioned. So basically, the translation wasn't carried out in China, by translators in-house, but it was commissioned to Italian translators. And then the Italian translations was then revised in-house in China. And the many corrections that the reviewers made were actually based on the idea that the text should be ideologically close to the Chinese. And even though the Italian translators then replying by saying that those passages sounded awkward, the reviewers didn't care. And I want to specify that I'm collaborating for this project also with Tanina Zappone. Professor Zappone is one of the translators, of the Italian translators. And she also wrote about this political process in an article of her. So, and this is part also of the. You can see this in the text. This process in the text as well.
Does the translation provide a second chance or another interpretation of China's propaganda?
Yeah, the Chinese version, of course, it presents Beijing's official narrative. So when it comes, for instance, to the history of Taiwan, it says that it belongs to China since the very beginning, blah, blah, blah. We are all familiar with this idea, no? And when something which was, I found interesting, I must confess that we started this project and for now we analyzed only the first volume of the governance of China. So at the moment there are 4 volumes. We are at the very beginning of our project. When it comes to the use of history in reclaiming the Taiwan's belonging to China, you can see that the history is told in a way which favors Beijing's position. So basically, there is no mention of the fact that Taiwanese people, that the island was populated by people even before the coming from the people, even before the emigration from the mainland. So even before, and there is no mention of the Europeans that basically arrived on Taiwan. And when it comes also to the role of Japan, we found that it was quite interesting the fact that when the period of occupation, when the colonial period is described, the Chinese version, so Xi Jinping always uses a passive form, and the word usually is occupying without specifying the agent. So given for granted it was Japan. But a focus of the Chinese version is merely on the fact that due to the weakness of China, Taiwan was occupied. Instead, in the English version, the agent, so Japan, is always specified, and the English version tends to focus more on the malign aggressor, to describe the fact that Japan took advantage of China's weakness to occupy Taiwan. So history, narrative on history always present kind of one side of the story. And in the case of the history of Taiwan, this is the case. It appears it's very apparent, I would say.
I see. And going back to your analysis of the 3 languages, why do you think the English translation is softer? And in what way?
It is softer when it comes to some. I give you an example to explain why. A key aspect of Beijing's official narrative under Xi Jinping has been the fact that the timetable, so to speak, because before Hu Jintao promoted the idea of a peaceful development of cross-strait relations, instead Xi Jinping uses the frame of China's rejuvenation to describe how the cross-strait relations should be managed. We know that the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation should be achieved by the centenary of the founding of the PRC. We have a year by when this goal should be achieved. So, and the fact of, and Xi Jinping has said multiple times that the problem, and I mean, it's, let's say, because in Chinese is 问题, so the problem of Taiwan should be solved and shouldn't be passed one generation after one generation. So in a sense, he's saying that we, and I kind of inclusive we, because he uses this kind of inclusive we, so basically China, Beijing and Taipei should start solving this issue now, should start trying to solve this issue now. In a sense, and as also other scholars have already pointed out, Xi Jinping is not making explicit what is already is implicit. So it must be solved one day. In the English version, and we found that in the Chinese version, this sense of this idea of getting closer to a solution is expressed through also the use of some adverbs like 逐步, which means, better than me, gradually. In the English version, instead, they use soon or later, without specifying how. So whether it must be a gradual process or whether it should be an absolute solution. In the Italian version, instead, they use the word gradually, per gradi, basically, in the Italian version. So you see that the Italian version tends to be more ideologically close to the Chinese. Instead, the English one adopt a more vague language to convey this aspect, for instance. But I mean, for this specific project of the Taiwan Fellowship, I focus on cross-strait relations. But before, I also focused on other fields. One of those is Xinjiang, which was a very hot topic for EU-China relations, or China-EU relations. Because at Ca Foscari University, I teach translation of political discourse. And with my students, we started working on white papers. And we also found that also in the case of Xinjiang, I wouldn't describe the English version as a softer version, but you see that there are some changes in the focus of the narrative. For instance, in the case of the translation of verbs, which in Chinese we know that there is no explicit indication unless there is guo le or something else. There is no or an adverb. There is no specific indication of the time. But when it comes to the English version of the text, we found out that the verbs are usually translated with has been or with the idea that something, how to say in English, it comes to mean in the Italian version of the text, passato prossimo, present perfect. The English translations usually uses present perfect to convey the idea that something started in the past, long before, and is still there.
By using present perfect, what are other choices of translation that they could have gone with?
Present, simple present, for instance. One sentence was like 新疆是中华民族的一部分. More or less is this sentence. And then the translation could be Xinjiang is part of the Chinese nation, but the English version, the English version then translates in it has always been part of. So adding also always an adverb, which is not in Chinese, which is not used in Chinese.
I see. So by using present perfect, they are instilling an idea that it has always been like this.
Yeah. So the idea, the representation provided by the English language is that it has always been like this. So Xinjiang is part of China's domestic politics. So no other countries should interfere in this issue. And in the case of Xinjiang, for instance, going back to the family metaphor I was describing for cross-strait relations, in the white papers, usually it's not always like this. There are some exemptions, but usually the family metaphor is not maintained. There is a widespread use of the present perfect to convey this idea of belonging for centuries, but the family metaphor is not always maintained. So the family metaphor is mostly used for the Chinese-speaking readers, the English one prefer a more neutral language in that aspect. So the focus is kind of different. In the Chinese version, you have Xinjiang is part of the Chinese family. So what the state is doing is good because it's from the point of view of a father who is taking care of his children.
And on that chilling note, when it comes to language, it's not difficult to spot China's efforts to distort history. But what's important about Beatrice's research is that China's propaganda doesn't just distort history, it is catered to its audience and aims to use the language to manipulate one's perception of China.